What was the response from idiots like Georges Monbiot? The response was to complain that this film wasn't woke enough, that it wasn't left-wing enough, that it wasn't anti-capitalist enough. And the laziest trope of all in left-wing politics, they had to go ahead and accuse the filmmaker of racism.
You didn't get me on camera doing this, did you? Not being judgmental or trying to play God, but we've got to deal with population growth and sustainable resources. We've all got to cut back.
Every expert I talked to wanted to bring my attention to the same underlying problem.
There are too many human beings using too much too fast.
As a global community, we really have got to start dealing with the issue of population.
Population growth continues to be not the elephant, the herd of elephants in the room.
Many years ago, there was a hit website called Couchsurfing. Couchsurfing was very similar to Airbnb, except nobody paid a dime. It relied on people making friends with one another, sending messages to one another, and then strangers inviting other strangers to stay in their home when they were on holiday, when they were traveling, etc. And in some ways, it was a beautiful thing. And the community tore itself apart, and the website failed because it shifted from being perceived as a charity that everyone contributed to equally out of the goodness of their hearts to being perceived as a private, for-profit corporation. And I say the word perceived because nothing else about the website really changed. Like, what is the difference when you click on the box and send someone a message? The website is just mediating people with goodwill and charity doing a good favor for one another. Why does it really matter when it's revealed to you that the people who kind of programmed and maintained the HTML and created this website, why does it matter when it's shockingly revealed that in fact there's a for-profit corporation behind the scenes and maybe they're making a tiny amount of money by having advertising in the corner of the screen, so on and so forth? Well, it matters. I mean, perception matters. And I remember I read different sort of political points of view about Couchsurfing at that time. And what one person said, very simply, was, look, after having reviewed all the facts and, why these people were disappointed because they actually donated money, and why other people were disappointed because they worked as volunteers and donated their time, and then find out someone else is profiting from that volunteer work and they're not getting paid, all the different broken hearts and disappointments. Ultimately, Couchsurfing is a website. And normally websites are just owned by one person. There's just one person whose name is on a piece of paper. They're the person who signed up and got that website address, got that URL, set it up. Ultimately, websites don't really exist as institutions at all. So what is it we're really doing here? There's a sense in which YouTube also is just a website. Or at least I can say, in a more perfect world, it would be just a website, but it's not. Right now, YouTube is this unbelievable bottleneck on freedom of speech, not because YouTube has its own standards of censorship, which it is entitled to. It's a website. It's owned by a particular company. It's run by a particular executive with a particular board of directors. The problem is there's no alternative to YouTube. And we have two wonderful examples of this that just popped off in the last week or so. Leafy is here, a commentator or comedy channel, whatever you want to say, gives millions of views per video. So, one of the most famous, influential names who's ever been on YouTube, even if there's no particular substitute videos. Leafy is here, had a video deleted for, quote, harassment, close quote. Here in Canada, the legal definition of harassment is that you do something that would cause a rational person to be afraid for their safety. So it's a threat that a rational and reasonable person would be afraid of. Okay? And what did Leafy do in this video? Did he point a gun at somebody or wave a knife around? No. He said of another YouTuber, quote, "I don't like anything about you. I don't even like your face," close quote. So if that qualifies as harassment, this video I'm recording right now should also be banned as harassment because I've quoted him. But the fundamental problem is, nobody said, when this controversy stormed across the internet briefly, people were briefly animated and upset about it, nobody said, don't worry, you can still see it on the competitor to YouTube called WeTube or UsTube. Nobody said, oh, well, don't worry, it was deleted off YouTube, but you can still see it on Vimeo. Nobody said, instead of drinking Coke, you can drink Pepsi, right? The problem is we don't have 2, 3, 4, 5 different versions of YouTube, different companies with different aesthetics and different moral standards and different modes of censorship, right? The problem is precisely that YouTube is the only game in town. Michael Moore is a wealthy, famous, successful filmmaker. The new film everyone is talking about, he actually is just the executive producer for. He doesn't do the voiceover. He doesn't seem to have contributed very much to the content at all. Kind of another. But Michael Moore's name is all over this new film called Planet of the Humans. Rightly or wrongly, it is being referred to as Michael Moore's Planet of the Humans, even if that's just a cynical marketing tactic. Why would Michael Moore put a major film on YouTube? Why? Just think about that. Just think about the era we're living in, okay? CNN is on YouTube. France 24 is on YouTube. BBC, the British Broadcasting Service, is on YouTube, all right? All of the most important broadcasters and increasingly the most important filmmakers are putting their work on YouTube. It's not surprising. It's kind of documentaries and political films first and foremost. Bernie Sanders is on YouTube, right? YouTube really matters. And I spend my time voicing my opinion on YouTube instead of writing essays or articles that could be published in the local newspaper here. Or I live in a small city. Maybe 300,000 people live here. It's really, the downtown area is more like 100,000 or less. This is a small city in Canada, and the newspaper, they would accept submissions. I probably could write and publish articles. My time is better spent making this YouTube video now to reach you. I'll not just reach a bigger audience, I'll have a more meaningful connection with that audience, blah, 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 blah. Okay? In many ways, publishing is dead. Nonfiction publishing is especially dead, and YouTube genuinely is, in 2020, a more important agora. It's a more important marketplace for ideas. It's a more important meeting place for politics. And this is implicitly indicated by the fact that Michael Moore published this film on YouTube at all. Okay, it wasn't pirated on YouTube. It was published on YouTube, and it had the potential to reach an audience of millions of people on YouTube. So when this film was somewhat mysteriously censored, deleted, allegedly it's just due to a rights infringement case, people are talking about to what extent that may or may not be the whole story, but for whatever reason, YouTube decides to delete this film, take it from both of you. I heard all kinds of reactions to this, yeah? But what I never heard was, don't worry, you can't see it on YouTube, but you can see it on Vimeo. You can see it on some competitor to YouTube, all right? I've never seen or heard anyone make that statement. What people say is, oh, don't worry, probably if you search carefully, you can find some pirate channel on YouTube, like someone who doesn't have the rights, someone who has illegally downloaded it and re-uploaded it, so you can still find it if you search around, right? Like, that's the alternative. When YouTube censors you, people search within YouTube for an alternative within YouTube that hasn't been censored yet, right? Just like the system of censorship hasn't caught up with it. Think about that. Think about that. This is a situation where there is Coca-Cola and there's no Pepsi, right? There is a really strange market dominance that's unhealthy for everyone. It's especially unhealthy for politics, right? Very briefly, the standards of censorship on YouTube, I don't begrudge YouTube the right to do that. You know what? YouTube ultimately is just a website. The same sense Couchsurfing was just a website. Ultimately, it may be one man's dream, or there may be one board of directors who come up with the rules that everyone has to play by, and fair's fair. If you don't like it, start your own website. If you don't like the rules on Facebook, use MySpace. If you don't like the rules on Instagram, join VSCO, join Tumblr, join Tinder, Twitter, whatever. There are alternatives, and there have to be alternatives. Okay, right now, what if you want to be a filmmaker who creates movies that have as much nudity and violence as is normal on HBO? You can't do that on YouTube. All right, YouTube standards, the censorship is much, much stricter than a mainstream American television channel like HBO. In fact, the censorship is much, much stricter than CNN. all right, than the BBC, the normal broadcast television for news. If you check now the fine print on why your video is demonetized, one of the reasons can simply be it discusses sensitive social issues, period. That's grounds for demonetization on YouTube. And of course, they have worse punishments than just demonetization. As mentioned, Leafy, it wasn't just demonetized, his video was completely deleted because he told someone, I don't like you, I don't even like your face. All right? So if that's not permissible, what is? And fundamentally, why is it not possible for Leafy or Michael Moore or anyone else to choose some other flavor, even if the alternative is just as much similar to YouTube as Coke tastes similar to Pepsi? Why isn't there somewhere else you can go with some other standards for censorship? And by the way, I would also be interested in seeing a YouTube channel, a competitor to YouTube, an alternative to YouTube that is much more strictly censored and where they guarantee that everything on the website is appropriate for 8-year-olds to watch, where it's, it's children's friendly broadcasting, or, there are some adults who don't want to see anything that has blood or violence, where those are the standards and there's no swearing at all. Great. I would like to make contact and upload to a different website too. I'd like that diversity in my own life. It'd be great to see that diversity in the internet. And we don't have that at all. We have this surreal bottleneck. Okay? About this particular film, Planet of the Humans, there's a big difference between saying a film is important and saying that it's intelligent. If my daughter one day asks me, should she see the Star Wars prequels? If she one day asks me, should she see Dances with Wolves? There's a great example. God, what a stupid movie. All right? I mean, there are a lot of movies. Gone with the Wind. You can say this is an important movie, but it's not intelligent. You're not going to learn anything from it. It's even kind of dumb. And I can talk you through why it was intelligent. Why was Dances with Wolves such a big deal? Lord of the Rings, whatever. This was important. It had some importance, but importance and intelligence are two very different things. In this same way, I can tell you with all sincerity that this new film, Planet of the Humans, it's important, but it's not intelligent. It's dumb. All right? It's a stupid, poorly made, poorly argued movie. When I watched it with my girlfriend, again and again, I hit the pause button. I was ranting. Why is there no math? They make these incredibly vague factual claims, and it would take them 1 second to put up the bar chart and say, hey, this is how much pollution is created by a coal power plant producing so many megawatt hours of electricity, and here's the comparison to oil and natural gas, and here's the comparison to solar wind. They could have so easily substantiated their claims. What are stated as absolute facts could have been made relative and comparative and reasonable, and instead it chooses to be unreasonable. There is a lot of stuff in this film that's fundamentally dumb. But guess what? It's still important. It's still important for millions of people to see this film and stop and ask themselves, what is biomass? All these companies are promoting biomass generation. What does the word biomass really mean? I already knew that back 1995 to 1997. When I was in university, like circa 1999, I remember going through this stuff and the United Nations definition of sustainability and being a really harsh critic of greenwashing and the corporate technical innovation paradigm of environmental progress. I was the harshest critic of all that stuff more than 20 years ago. So none of this was news to me, all right? And for me also, that might lead me to be kind of contemptuous and dismissive of this movie, but I'm not. I appreciate that there are millions of people who need to hear this very simple, fundamental message. Biomass does not mean what you think it means, right? That innovations like solar and wind power are not a substitute for dealing with these underlying fundamental problems. There is an important message here, however imperfect. And guess what? Freedom of speech doesn't just exist for people you agree with. Freedom of speech doesn't just exist for people who can express their points perfectly, backed up with data and charts and facts and figures. Either it exists for the people who are wrong along with the people who are right, or it exists for nobody at all, right? Either freedom of speech can lead us right now to have this meaningful discussion, or it can't. And what was the response from the ecological left wing? What was the response from idiots like Georges Monbiot? The response was to complain that this film wasn't woke enough, that it wasn't left-wing enough, that it wasn't anti-capitalist enough. And the laziest trope of all in left-wing politics, they had to go ahead and accuse the filmmaker of racism.
The only concrete proposal in your film was that there should be a mass die-off because the problem was population.
You've got to start dealing with the issue of population.
I actually am scared. I lose sleep over all of this.
Now, population growth is what people reach for when they don't want to face structural and systemic problems such as capitalism. The greater part of population growth is happening amongst the world's poorest people who consume very little. And so what we see is the phenomenon of comparatively wealthy white people saying we're not the problem, our consumption growth isn't the issue, it's those people breeding. They are the problem. This claim is inherently racist.
I think I don't need to prove to you that this film is not racist. That's an unbelievably unreasonable, stupid criticism to direct at a film that does deserve criticism, that would benefit from criticism, where all of us can learn more by giving an in-depth and meaningful criticism. And no. The left wing wants to say, not woke enough, not anti-capitalist enough, and that somehow, implicitly, it's racist. There isn't a single word in the whole film that points the finger of blame at Africa. There isn't a single word that points the finger of blame at South America or China. But guess what, guys? When it comes to ecology, a mammal's a mammal. You think China and Brazil and Africa don't matter? They do. And there's a really strange kind of racism if you only want to blame white people the way George Malvio does. Because guess what? The computer I'm using to record this right now, the cell phone I have in my pocket, the microphone, the bench I'm sitting on, almost everything you can see on camera right now was made in China. There's a lot of pollution in China for stuff we consume in the Western world. It's all connected. Stop pretending white people only are the problem. That's also a ridiculous position to adopt. Someone can make a new movie on that. Yes, overpopulation is a problem. No, it's not the whole problem. And just as there is not a single word in this movie that's racist, there's also not a single word in this movie that recognizes the overwhelming significance of meat and dairy consumption. We're going to not bother to mention leather and fur. They're also terrible. However, most people don't buy a new leather coat every day, whereas they do eat pork, beef, etc., and fish, chicken, day after day after day, 3 meals a day. So the scale of the problem with consumption in terms of eating meat and dairy is much, much larger, even though leather, also terrible, should be abolished, all right? The fundamental problem with the approach this film has to overpopulation is not that it's racist. It's that it only counts the overpopulation of humans. What you need to think about, what you need to understand, is that the Earth is overpopulated with mammals. If you take a small island, let's just say it's Japan. It's not that small. The whole main island of Japan, if you cut the number of humans in half, but you triple the number of cows and triple the number of pigs, what have you got? An ecological disaster, okay? Cows and pigs eat food every day. They poo every day, but their poo doesn't go into a sewage treatment system, right? Their poo goes straight in there. So the ecological impacts are worse. You think in your mind's eye that you just take a bunch of soybeans and feed them to a cow and generate beef out of it? Do the calculations. Do the math step by step. That cow's got to live for more than a day. It's got to breathe the air and drink water and urinate and defecate and consume soybeans day after day after day after day, living in, inhumane, awful conditions until one day it dies. And as terrible as all that is, to look at it from a completely Machiavellian perspective, it's also just an unbelievable waste of resources. So the carrying capacity of the Earth can't be measured in humans alone. It has to be measured in mammals. The economic and ecological efficiency of a society of vegans is exponentially better than a society of beef eaters, pork eaters, chicken eaters, so on and so forth. So everyone's saying the elephant in the room is population. Well, yes and no. Ultimately, the elephant in the room is not human population. It's the total population of mammals, adding together the billions of people with the billions and billions of animals that we raise, hold in captivity, and exploit for our own unnecessary, unhealthy, and immoral dietary needs. It's a stupid film. It's an important film. And it's a goddamn shame that in 2020, People as famous, wealthy, and powerful as Leafy is here, as famous, wealthy, and powerful as Michael Moore, are being deplatformed and silenced by YouTube, because YouTube has this amazing bottleneck on freedom of speech on what is the most powerful, the most important way to get a message like this out to millions of people. I hate this film. I thought it was garbage, but I wish millions of people could see it. I wish millions of people could get inspired to engage in a critical reaction to it, do their own thinking, do their own Google searching, find the numbers that the film doesn't provide you with. It could lead us in a really productive set of reflections and discussions, including on the fact that ultimately, fundamentally, overpopulation cannot be measured in two-legged creatures alone. It has to be measured with four-legged creatures in the calculus as well. But because of YouTube, we won't have that opportunity. And what is the alternative? Looking forward in 2020, who will stand up and give us an alternative to YouTube when online video is more important than ever before?